Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. So it is a new year, so I thought, well, let's go ahead and make a new flipping guide. And I'm not going to sit here and say that things change that quickly, that there needs to be a new flipping guide every year. However, looking back at the one I made about a year ago, I think there's room for improvements and making it clear, more concise. So that's my reason for making another one. So today's guide is going to be an introduction to flipping. However, I'm going to make a few assumptions. One is that you understand how the grand exchange works at a basic level anyway. If you don't, I actually have a very specific video on that, which I will leave in the description. So this video is for people who are just getting into flipping. You want some actionable advice that will actually help you get better at flipping, so you can move up from being a beginner to maybe intermediate, however you want to describe it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, the very first question I almost always get is, how much money do I need to start flipping? And while I wouldn't say there is a defined amount, you are working off of percentages, which means the more money you have, the more money you're going to be receiving back. On this account here, I just put 1 million coins on it just for practice. 1 million GP is a fine amount just to start practicing. I'm not going to be making any crazy returns here. Once you have 5 million GP or 10 million GP, that's when it starts kind of being worth your time. Now, one of the best pieces of advice I could give you right away before we even get into anything else is the quicker you can move away from the most basic recommended items and finding more unique, lesser known flips, the better you're gonna be. You could watch 100 of my videos, learn about all the items I'm doing, but in the end, you're gonna be much more profitable if you can find these items yourself. Now let's go ahead and start with item selection. Now, for any beginner, I would always recommend doing high volume items. And when I say that, I mean fairly cheap items that are traded a lot. A really good way to get some inspiration is to go into the RuneScape wiki. Just scroll down here to the drop tables and look at some of the items. We have death runes, law runes, chaos runes. We have herbs, we have seeds, flax, U-logs, adamant bars. Pretty much anything here is going to be traded a lot, so it is a pretty good place to start. Now, pretty much all I'm going to do is pick an item from that list or another high volume item that is within our budget. So let's go ahead and do grapes. That is on the Zulrah drop table. So what we want to do is instantly buy it. So what we're going to do is up the percentage by 5, 10, 15%, something like that. Hit confirm and it will instantly come through. We're going to hit collect. And then we're going to click on the grape and then we're going to go ahead and sell it instantly. Now what I've done is a margin check. If we go to history, we can see the difference between the buy price and the sell price. So on a lot of cheaper items, 1 GP is pretty much going to be what the margin is going to be. I would recommend trying to find something bigger than that. Okay, so I went ahead and tried the cannonball. That is also a drop on the Zulrah drop table. You can see right here, there is a 15 GP difference between the buy price and the sell price. Keeping in mind the price that I instantly sold the cannonball at is roughly the price I now want to go ahead and purchase the cannonballs at. So we're going to go ahead and click on cannonball. And now we have a bit of a decision to make. Do I change that price or not? Now that comes down to a bit of a personal preference, but in my opinion, undercutting, totally fair game. I pretty much always undercut, and I know a lot of people are not gonna like that, but just like in the real life market, there is no rules against undercutting someone else. That's just business, baby. There are some cases where I wouldn't undercut, mainly offers I plan on leaving in for a long time anyway. And if the margin is very, very small. If you only have a 1, 2, or 3 GP margin, I wouldn't really recommend undercutting too much because that's taking away 33%, 66% of your profit. It is a pretty huge chunk. However, in this case, I am going to undercut by 1 by hitting the +1 button. And let's just go ahead and invest all of our money into cannonballs. We'll do 4,000 cannonballs, hit confirm, and that's pretty much it. We're just going to go ahead and wait. Okay, so I mentioned that I would be making a spreadsheet, and this is something I would recommend to someone who is a beginner. No, this is really not necessary, but that kind of goes back to my earlier point that the quicker that you can find items that less people are doing and less people are recommending, the better off you are going to be. So what I would do is just write down the item, and the margin, which we can see is actually 15 GP. That is really, really good. And that's pretty much it. I would just continue doing that for the first couple of weeks. And eventually you're going to have a big list of items that are profitable. And the thing is that items that are profitable once often are profitable a second time, even weeks later. So we can see already that we bought the cannonballs for 221. Now, if we go back to our history, we're looking to sell them for 235, but in this case, the margin is so big, I would actually recommend selling them for 234. Boom, that's it. Hit confirm, and now we're just going to go ahead and wait. Now, besides the margin, the next most important thing that is going to impact how much money you make flipping is the buying limit. Now, cannonballs trade so much every day. Everyone's making cannonballs. You would think you could just flip this item all day because that is a really good margin for how expensive it is. However, one thing that restricts most items is a buying limit. But by looking up the item, we can see the buying limit, which it shows for the cannonball is 7,000. Now, if the limit is 7,000, that means I can only buy 7,000 cannonballs every 4 hours. Once I have bought 7,000, I will not be able to purchase any more on this account until 4 hours have passed. One thing to note though is there is no limit on selling, which means if you've accumulated a lot of items, you don't need to wait to actually sell them. Now, I've only been talking a few minutes here, but our cannonball sale is back. So just like that, we can go ahead and claim it and see how much money we ended up making. And look at that, we made 51K, which is a very, very good flip. 51K in just a few minutes with our cash stack amount is incredible. Now let's just go ahead and do that again. Keeping in mind that the limit is 7,000 for this item, which means we need to actually go ahead and modify this offer. One other tip I have is if you're in the history, you can actually click on the offer to put in a buy offer at that exact same price and exact same quantity. However, we need to change that to 3,000 because 3,000 plus 4,000 is 7,000, which is the limit. Perfect, let's go ahead and put that offer in again. And we're gonna leave that for another minute. Okay, just to highlight something quickly here, we can see that my offer is 99.9% of the way through. This really highlights that we hit the limit. You can see that we got 6,999 cannonballs in total. Now the reason we didn't get that last one is because we did a margin check earlier, which involved buying one cannonball. So you can see it actually does add up exactly to 7,000. And we'll put that in for 234, finishing off that flip. Well, there we go. Our cannonball flip came back pretty much immediately for another 13 GP profit, which I have to highlight again is pretty abnormal. That is very good for the cost of this item. You can see that we got 90K back with very minimal work and with a very minimal cash stack. So I'm extremely happy with that, but I wouldn't expect that kind of profits every time. I'm going to talk a little bit about expected return rates, percentages, stuff like that a little bit later. So I decided just for fun, I would go ahead and augment our spreadsheet a tiny bit. Now, first up here, one thing we need to correct is the margin wasn't actually 15. Keeping in mind that we undercut on both the buy and sell price by 1 GP, which means the margin was actually 13. For the quantity, we did 7,000. Now, if you want to save a bit of time, on Google Spreadsheets, you can put in functions. Now, this would be the cell D5 multiplied by the cell C5, which would give us our profit. Your margin times the quantity will give you your total profit. So our total profit was 91,000. There we go, easy as that. You've now created a flipping spreadsheet to track your profits, your items, and stuff like that. Now earlier I mentioned that I would highly recommend starting with high volume items. The main reason for that is they are low risk. Yes, it is possible to lose money on it, but you're never going to lose a substantial amount of money, and they're perfect for practicing with. Another really huge benefit, especially when you don't have that much money, is since they are so quick, you can actually flip a quarter of the buying limit, half the buying limit. It flips back and forth so quickly that you don't actually have to waste too much time, and you can still get good margins just by being patient. A good example is the cannonball flip we just did. I technically didn't actually have enough money to do the full buying limit, which is what you should generally shoot for. But as it was so quick, we were able to do the entire flip, which would normally cost about 1.5 mil, in just a matter of minutes. Now, another really awesome resource for finding high volume flips is actually just on the RuneScape website. They actually have a top 100 most traded items list, which I'll leave a link in the description for that. Now, I wouldn't really do anything under maybe 50 GP because at that point the margin is going to be so low. Items within the 100 GP to 200 GP range are generally the best, but really it's all going to be what your budget is. Now, in general, I wouldn't recommend putting all of your money into one item because that is kind of putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. However, when you're practicing and you just have a low amount of money, doing one flip at a time is actually a good idea. Okay, next up here, let's try maybe the adamant dart tip. Now, keeping in mind that this process can take quite a while sometimes if you're looking for that perfect item. So once again, we bought it for 192 and we sold it for 190. 2 GP, you could go ahead and do that, but I'm going to keep looking. Okay, there we go. That is a good one. We just price checked, let's see here, 5 or 6 different items. So it's not instant by any means, but we found a really nice margin on the Dragonstone Bolt tip. So we're going to go ahead and click on it. We're going to undercut this margin again, and we're just going to invest all of our money, which will be about half we can afford. actually almost exactly half. You know what, let's just do 5,000 to make it a nice even amount. There we go, we got another offer in, and wow. Okay, so something really strange happened. I just margin checked it for 197 into 209, yet when I put the offer in, I instantly bought it, and I think for even less. So weird things happen in the Grand Exchange, and they're not always explainable. There's a lot of moving parts going on at once. People are constantly taking out and putting in offers, so this kind of does happen. Now, this either could be a really good thing or potentially a bad thing. It's kind of hard to say. But what you want to do is go ahead and recheck the margin almost immediately. Now, actually, this is a really good example. So in this case, I would recommend trying to be a little patient. I would still put it back in for maybe a similar margin, but I might not shoot as high. Let's maybe go for 204. We're still looking to make about 50K in profit. And just because the offer dipped quickly doesn't necessarily mean it won't go back up. Someone may have just dumped a ton of Dragonstone bolt tips at that moment. We don't really know, but all we know is we did check the margin. So there is some data telling us that it still could sell at this price. I'm gonna wait maybe 20 or 30 minutes. We'll see if it sells. If not, we may have to take a loss or maybe we'll break even. Well, there we go. Everything worked out and the Dragonstone bolt tips sold off in around 20 minutes. It didn't take that long. However, it was not instant, which means you do need to have a certain degree of patience. So let's go ahead and collect that, bring this up to 1,132K. So I can see here that we made around 40,000 GP, but let's go ahead and put that into our flipping spreadsheet. Okay, next item was Dragonstone bolt tips. The margin once again is the price you were selling them at minus the price that you were buying them at. So 204 minus 195 is 9. So the margin is 9, the quantity is 5,000. And what's really nice about the function in the spreadsheet is if you just copy that number and bump it below, it'll automatically fill in with the next row's data, which means we made another 45,000 in profit right there. Awesome. Now, flipping in my mind is quick. It's the act of buying and selling things for the exact margin that you expect, and that would be considered a success. Some people will buy items and hold on to them for a while in hopes that they will go up. When you are just starting out, try to just go for the margin that you see at that moment. This will break flipping down to a very manageable process that doesn't require actually too much thought at all. You just buy and sell a bunch of items till you find something with a good margin that you know will sell pretty quickly, and then you just go for that exact margin. You don't have to worry about game updates affecting prices. You don't have to worry about the meta. All you have to worry about is the margin right then. That is a very simplistic way to look at it, but in my opinion, a better way to learn. Now, another question that people eventually have is, well, which flip is actually better? This one I definitely made more money off of, but it may have cost me more money to actually get that result. This starts being more apparent when you have a limited amount of money to work with and you have a ton of different flips you could potentially do. Which one is going to be a better use of your time? Which one is going to be more efficient? So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more things to this table so we can get an accurate statistic that will tell us which flips are pretty much objectively better than the other. So first up here, I'm going to go ahead and move my column over a bit. Now first up here, I need to put in a tab for item price, and that's going to be the price that you are going to buy the item at. So for example, the cannonball we bought at 221 and the Dragonstone bolts we bought at 195. Okay, so now we have all the information we need to calculate the ROI, which stands for return on investment. This is going to be a % return for the amount of money that you invest, which makes it easy to compare different items. Now, before we calculate it, which item do you think was more efficient? Like I said earlier, this item cost more money and the return was 91,000. This item was cheaper, had a lesser margin, and we got 45,000 back from that. So the item with the higher return on investment is going to be the better item to do because you're getting more back for less of an investment. Now, a really easy way to get a rough ROI is to take the margin and divide it by the item price. Or maybe we should call this the buy offer. So we're going to take the margin, which is 13. We're going to divide that by the buy offer, which is 221. And then we're going to multiply that by 100. And once we click out, it'll calculate our ROI, which in this case is 5.8%. That is a very good ROI. So now we're going to do the exact same thing with this cell. To put in a function, you need to tap the equals sign. Then we're going to click on the margin, which is 9, divided by the buy offer, which is 195, and then we're going to multiply that by 100, giving us a return on investment of 4.6%. So to conclude, the cannonball was a more efficient flip, even though it was more expensive. So I've talked a lot about high volume items and resource items, stuff like that, but where do like the higher margin items fit in? The type of items that you see people really making the big money on. Now, should you be doing that as a beginner? And the answer is yes, you could definitely try. There are a ton of what I would call high margin items that really don't actually cost that much money. Now, there are a few extra pitfalls you want to look out for when you are doing these type of items that weren't present with the resource items. The main one being is that to determine the margin, it will actually be costing you a substantial amount of money. Now, I am going to go ahead and pick an item that is within my price range right now, and I'm just going to go ahead and price check it right now. So let's go ahead and look at the Kirilla's Coif. Right here, it's only around 80,000 GP. And let's just go ahead and price check it. So once again, we're going to up it by 10%. Instantly buys, and we bought it for 75,690. And then we're going to go ahead and sell it. Okay, right there, that's showing about a 600 GP margin. I realistically wouldn't really bother with this item. Let's go find another one. Another cheap item that I know of is the Uncharged Trident. We're going to actually go bump that up quite a bit. We bought it for 65k pretty much. And we sold it for 42,050. That is a really massive margin. So we can see here the margin is roughly 22,000. So I'm going to go put a quantity in for 7, and I'm going to explain why in just a minute. Now, like I was saying, one of the pitfalls with high margin items is the fact that price checking actually has a substantive cost. One other restriction is that high margin items tend to have very low buying limits. For example, the Uncharged Trident has a limit of 8, and remember I price checked 1, so that actually means our buying limit is 7. Now that's the reason I put an offer in for 7 of them. Well, there we go, we already bought the Uncharged Tridents for 42k, so we're going to go ahead and claim that offer. Keeping in mind that I am undercutting once again, I would definitely recommend doing it on high margin items. There's no excuse not to. That is your item until you're done with it. People may not like me for that, but the reality is it's going to take so much longer if you don't undercut. So anyway, we bought it for 42,000 and now we're going to sell it for 64,994. And there we go, we have another sell offer in. So we have the Uncharged Trident. The buy price was 42,051. The margin was 64,994 minus 42,051, which means our margin is 22,943k, which is very, very nice. Now, there are a few different ways you could put the quantity in here. You could say we did 8, which is true. We did flip 8 of them technically. However, the problem is we actually only profited on 6 of them. And the reason for that is we ended up losing money on the very first one. On the second one we buy and sell, we have now broken even. And it's only on the remaining 6 in this case that we'll actually profit on, so I'm actually just going to go ahead and put a 6 here, just for simplicity's sake. And that works for every item. If you happen to have an item that has a buying limit of 5 and you price check it, that means you're only going to profit off of 3. Okay, so once again, we're going to go ahead and copy this number, put it down here, showing our profit is going to be about 137,000 GP, which is very good. And what do you think the return on investment is going to be for this one? Has a much higher margin, but also a much higher cost, yet the return on investment is going to be much, much higher, actually over 50%. Now, it is common for high margin items like this to have a much higher return on investment. What you are sacrificing is the speed. Often items like this are going to take a lot longer to buy and sell, which means you won't be able to do them as frequently. Well, there we go, we're back on the Grand Exchange and everything sold off. That took about 20 minutes in total. So let's go ahead and claim that and see how much money we're actually at. We are up to 1,269k, which means we've made about, well, getting pretty close to 300k just in this video. So there we go, that was an example of a pretty successful high margin flip. These ones are going to take a lot longer to get used to. Finding a good selection of items to do is going to take a while as well. The best advice I could give you is to just look through the wiki, look at clue scroll rewards. That's a good place to start. Looking at gear requirements for certain bosses and just picking out the cheaper items. There's a lot of items out there, but it's just going to take a bit of time to find them. Pretty much anything can work, but when you're learning, I would stick to the more common, highly traded items. I know this video is getting pretty long, but the very final thing I want to do is just add up my profit from my spreadsheet and see how accurate it is. Now what we're going to actually do here is just insert a function, and we're going to go and sum, I think, from F5 to F7, and that is going to show our total profit at 273k. We're actually off by about 4k, not quite sure what happened there, but it is roughly pretty close. And there's just so much I could talk about, but this video is already getting ridiculously long and not as concise as I had hoped yet. I hope you did enjoy the more in-depth look, but I do think I covered most of the important things to get you started. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, I would appreciate it if you went ahead and subscribed. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you next time.